Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to C-Suite Talks. We speak with industry leaders, introducing you to some of the most interesting people and businesses today. I'm Dianne Gubin, co-CEO of C-Suite, along with...
I'm Beth Hill, being co-CEO of C-Suite. Welcome to C-Suite Talks. This week we have Jasmin Iolani with us. She's the author of the book Hula, and we are so blessed to have her today. And we thought it would be best today if she introduced herself, because she has a really good background in multi-levels. And so with that, Jasmin, thank you for having with us today. And if you don't mind telling the listeners a little bit about yourself, because it's a very diverse background.
Yes, it's a very roundabout way of finding my way to being a novelist. Well, my name is Jasmin Iolani Hakes, and it's a pleasure to be here. I was a political campaign strategist for years. I was in fundraising and went into the nonprofit world, grant writing. So in kind of everything I did, I found the story in it. I managed to find my way into like telling a story and fundraising. All of those things were all about telling stories. And then I eventually joined forces with a startup that is designed to help more kind of grassroots candidates run for office without a lot of money. And so it's kind of an app on your phone, and and you go and it tracks all your door knocking and all your donors and everything like that. And so I was working with Open Campaign for a few years, advising them while also writing on the side, and so then ended up writing Hula during that time, and now I'm just doing that. So it's been
That's
quite a ride.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Terrific. And I know it was quite a journey for you to get the book published,
Yeah, why
Yes.
don't you go through kind of
right?
your journey that you went
Yeah.
through? Because I think it's very heartfelt, and I think
It
Well,
people would
is.
like to hear that
it
a
was
little
it
bit. What you want to share a little bit.
yeah, well, I mean it was a long journey, and yeah, that's a whole saga. But we sold originally in 2019, and which, it was pre-COVID, so it was a totally very, very, very different world. And the book was kind of really scary to put out because it touched on all my own insecurities. And basically it's about a girl who aspires to be a hula dancer, but she doesn't have Hawaiian on her birth certificate, and she looks like me, which is not what you think of when you think of a hula dancer. She's fair skinned and she has light eyes, and that kind of that aspect of the story was very autobiographical. I was a hula dancer and kind of grew up wondering my place in Hawaii. And so I was, kind of very excited but nervous about putting it out in the world, and because it was all my deepest, darkest fears and insecurities. And then COVID happened. And so, everything kind of got delayed and reshuffled. And I went through a variety of editors. And what was interesting about that process was that throughout the years of trying to publish a book about a place that many people think they know, but also it being a story of a Hawaii that very few people know about. And even for myself, I had to do a lot of research because, even though I was born and raised there, at that time, we didn't learn Hawaiian history. We didn't learn, why we came to think of blood being the definitive, identifier of,
Mm.
of who you are, and all of these things. And why there were struggles with sovereignty, and what happened to the kingdom, and how it became a state, and so it was just this very interesting process of finding the right publishing house, finding the right editor that would trust me as much as I would trust them, that we're both kind of feeling our way, because editors often, they're asking questions, but it's based on some kind of knowledge about a thing. They're saying, well, would this really happen, and would this really happen? And this book required a lot of code switching, but it wasn't set in a country that was clearly foreign, quote unquote.
Right.
And so, asking a reader to code switch in a place where you think you're familiar with it, was an interesting process. And it's written in Pidgin, which is kind of the local dialect, and it kind of came about during Hawaii sugarcane era, when you had minorities from all over the world working the sugarcane. And so it was kind of like a stone soup language of, of all these different languages kind of cobbled together. And that, growing up, we spoke very heavy pidgin, and it was there's a very negative stigma again, and it was very discriminated against. You were automatically assumed to be very unrefined and uneducated and simple minded, all of these things. And so it was really important for me to write it in the language of my birth, and have these very complex subjects being tackled by people who speak pidgin. But that was, I think, even difficult for the copywriters. I had to kind of create a lexicon for them to refer to and say, no, I really did mean was and not were, and, and things like that. And so we went through it for many years with a fine tooth comb, making sure that everything was right. And when you're writing about a specific place that has been so overlooked, it does, all those little details mean so much.
Right.
Yeah,
So this
no, I've
book is
enjoyed it. It's really good.
so for heart and
Yeah.
soul. So you know what? Again, why don't you just kind of, besides your professional, like, just tell us a little bit about growing up, and why did you even choose to leave Hawaii and why did you choose to write this book? Like, it's your soul
Right.
in it.
Well, so the Hula is based in a kind of a neighborhood of Hilo. So Hilo's the town, and then Keaukaha is a little neighborhood within Hilo. And in Keaukaha, which is where I spent most of my, my keiki days, my baby days, it was very much at that time kind of protected. We don't have a lot of hotels. There wasn't a lot of traffic, and so when you did have tourists, it was very clear who was them versus who was us. And if you looked at like my baby pictures, there's me, this little white thing, and amongst all my cousins, and it was like a white Where's Waldo, and it was just like, there's Jasmine. And I think having that and looking so different from my mom and my cousins and everybody around me, while also dancing hula for a very traditional halau, which is a hula school, and having the name Iolani, names in Hawaii are a very big deal, and you're given them usually through dreams and prophecies and all of these things from family or godmothers, and so the name Iolani comes from this very great, very renowned, beloved hula dancer, Iolani Loahine. So it's a very big name to inherit. So I was always very aware that I was Iolani. And I loved dancing hula, but I would look in the mirror and I didn't look like how I thought I should look. And for many years I thought it was coming from outside, and over the years I've come to realize a lot of that insecurity was just more internal than anything else. But it was hard, I think, knowing where I belonged. Even in school, it was, you have locals and then you have people that moved there. I was a local, but I looked like the people that moved there,
Move
from
there.
the
Yeah.
outside. And so I think I found solace in reading. So I was always a big reader. And so during high school, I only went to school in the mornings, and I shelved books at the public library in the afternoons. And I just read like indiscriminately anything I could get my hands on. The librarians didn't like me very much because I didn't work. I read, but and nothing about those books reflected the world that I lived in. Nothing about those books had people that just talked the way my community talked, and cared about the things that my community cared about, and were challenged by the things that my community were challenged by. And the few depictions of Hawaii that were available were so far away from anything I had ever experienced, and they were so manicured that anything on the TV and stuff, we just kind of dismissed it. And I think that stayed with me, that desire to see some kind of reflection of maybe not necessarily of my story, because it was somewhat of an anomaly in Hawaii, but at least some kind of reflection of the complexity and the nuance of the culture and of the struggles and of just reality there. And so, yeah, it is very near and dear to my heart, but I think once it started becoming what it eventually became, I started feeling more like the steward of this thing versus like the creator of it, and so this I think is one of those books that I could never write again. I can't write a follow-up to it or something. I can write something else, but this book for me was basically, I guess, my way of trying to show my appreciation for my home, because this is a very long, circuitous route to answer your question of why I left. But I think it was always because I wanted to not feel like I didn't belong. And I wanted to go somewhere where I didn't feel like I had to prove who I was and all of those things. And I very much assigned all those feelings to Hilo and to Keokaha.
Oh,
And,
okay.
And so I wanted to get away, and I was also very involved and fascinated with politics. And so I kind of wrote a letter, just one of those like, Dear Mr. President, but I wrote to the governor's office of California. I didn't know who the governor was. It was just like somewhere else, but it was still the closest place I could think of and like get the address to. And I got an internship, and so I sold everything I owned, and I put my car on a barge and came with my daughter, who was 2, almost 3 at the time. And it was terrifying. I had never lived in like winter. I had never driven on a freeway, parallel parking was a challenge, all of those things. And what I
Well,
realized
good for you.
it was terrifying. I drove side
Especially
streets for
LA,
years.
being out in LA.
Oh yeah.
She
No,
was,
I couldn't do it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But,
Where did you?
oh, sorry. But what happened then was interesting, because what I realized was I wasn't, it was such a cultural like shift. It was like I had moved countries, and I realized people in California didn't see me as white. They were like, are you Mexican? Or and they couldn't figure out my accent. I had a heavy pigeon kind of, kind of twang, and I overcorrected it so much they thought I was Canadian or something. Nobody could figure it out, and so I was very self-conscious. And so
Poor
over the
thing.
years, I think the farther I got from Hawaii, because I moved to Europe, the farther I got from Hawaii, the more it became clear how deep my roots went there and how much I am from there. And so I think this book was another way for me to kind of reunite with that part of me that I tried to escape for so many years, So,
Oh, that's so lovely. So tell us how you decided to write the book. You wrote the book. Tell us about your journey through the publishing industry,
Oh yeah,
and how
that's
did
a
you
good
get
story.
through? And yeah, talk to us
Yeah.
about that.
well, so I had been trying to write a book about Hawaii in all the wrong ways for about a decade. And I think it wasn't working, but now I realize it was because I was trying to write about a Hawaii without being specific, it's like, and being very safe, not writing about what I knew, just kind of making up an alternative Hawaii. And, and so I kept getting almost there. I kept almost getting an agent and almost getting published. And throughout the years where I was very insecure, and so never really thought of myself as being ambitious or somebody who would say, I'm going to go and be a writer. It was more of like, I have this story and I don't know how to get it out of me. So I'm going to go to these conferences and I'm going to learn how to write and improve this craft so that this book can kind of be released from me. And it didn't work. It was just like, I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm at the limit. I've learned all I can learn. It's not going to happen. But at that same time, I had been applying to writing residencies and everything, because I'd been a single mom and, and writing, hiding in the bathroom while they're waiting for breakfast and, and everything. And so I got this writing residency for a month alone in a cabin in the woods, and they'll feed me. And it was such a prestigious offer that it was almost kind of scary to accept it. there was like this imposter syndrome thing that even just accepting
wow.
was acknowledging this ambitious thing I was trying to do. But I had been applying for so many years that I couldn't turn it down. And I was like, well, I'm not going to tell them that I quit writing and I'm not going to write anymore. I'm just going to go and just enjoy it, and be there. And on the way there, it takes trains, planes, and automobiles and ferries and all the things to get there. On the way there, a sentence popped up in my head, and it was in Pidgin, and it was fun to write. And I had almost kind of forgotten that I enjoyed writing. And so all of a sudden, by the time I got to the actual residency on day one, I had pages in my notebook just filled, because something about being able to write in that voice in a way that I had never seen reflected on paper before in any kind of way. It was just this, it was like a door opened. And so for that month, I was just this crazy woman. I was just writing thousands of words a day. I don't think that will ever happen to me again. All the other residents just thought I was like losing my mind, which I probably was, you know. And so it came out by the time the month was over, I was just about done with it. And one of the other residents had told me about this conference. It's a huge writing conference. And she said, it's in my hometown this year. You should go, and, and you'll meet other writers and learn about the business of it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this thing. And that conference, so I immediately registered for it. And so I started getting these emails for the conference, and this was this inaugural year of this conference having this program where you can submit a query letter, which is basically how you introduce yourself to agents and try to get an agent, where you say, hi, this is my project, this is my bio, and would you like to see some of the work? And so you just kind of were able to submit this blind query letter, not knowing if any agent at all will read it, or who, if they do, and I didn't know that agents, because this conference is geared towards professional writers, that they really do look at that query pile. So I had 3 agents who asked for the full manuscript and then scheduled a time to meet with me during the conference. And I thought, okay, this book is not ready to be sent out. It's a total mess, but there's something about it that scares me, which made me realize from the get-go that there was something different about it. I had never written anything that kind of made my hands shake before, and when I read it out loud, I just cried. There was so much emotion in it. And I didn't think it was just me, there was something different about this. And so I was like, well, at least when they say no, I'll have them in a room and I can ask them why, and, and I can kind of learn from them, and they're stuck with me until, they kick me out. And I like to tell this story, this portion of the story, because it just goes to show how subjective this business is. So the first agent that I meet with says, I love the book. It's really rough around the edges. It needs a lot of work. But if you do XYZ, come back to me. I'd love to, take another look at it, which is more than I expected. It was very gracious. I learned, she had some great suggestions. So I was feeling pretty good. I was like, okay, that's what I kind of expected. So I walk into the next, meeting, and the next agent, who they were all from big agencies. So I was kind of like, nervous and whatever. And she started kind of saying the same thing of, but instead of saying, why don't you work on it and come back to me? She said, so why don't you take some like craft classes? And like, she was trying to tell me like, go learn how to write and then come back to me, and I was just crushed. I was like, I'm like, I'm not even going to go to the third. I can't handle it. If it's going downhill, I can't do this. And so I kind of milled around, and then I felt bad. I didn't want to, stand up the next agent. So I went into the boardroom, and I was kind of just like looking down, and dejected already, because she started saying the same thing, right? It's rough. There's an energy to it, but it's rough. But, if you do these things. And so I'm just listening to her, and I'm kind of tuning out to, I think, just to save myself and my ego, what was left of it. And so there was a pause, and I looked up, and she's like, so do you want to think about it? And I said, think about what? And she's like, I've been waiting all my life for this book. I want to work with you like right now. And I was like, and I kept, even then, you get so used to protecting yourselves from the no's that
Right.
when you get a yes, it's kind of jarring, and I was like, okay. And I just walked out of the room, and I walked down the hall, and I stopped, and I was like, oh my. And then I turned right back around, and I opened the door. I was like, wait, what just happened? And we were hugging and crying, and and it was just this, I was like, can we do this over? And this is real. And it turned out that she used to be an editor. And so for a few months, for about 4 months, we started working on it. And what I didn't know was, while I was working on her suggestions and her edits, she was going and flying between LA and New York and telling all these editors, like, I just found this thing and I can't wait to show it to you. And so by the time we were ready to kind of have, like, ask around or show it to editors, there was she had created such a buzz that it sold at auction, for a life-changing sum for somebody who was a single mom from migrant workers, and it was an incredible lesson in the yes, and understanding what that felt like and how different that is um to accept praise and compliments, and and the trust and the excitement that somebody, this industry that is notoriously cynical and closed door, wants something that I did, especially something that has been so overlooked and undervalued to all tourists and to every industry, to see that they value that was very incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
That's
So
awesome.
You have a
That's
quote.
a very good story.
You have a quote from Oprah. You have lots of quotes here, but the quote from Oprah says, "This debut novel moves with graceful power and sings with a voice as spellbinding as the rolling surf." I think that really sums up Hulu too, because you have so many amazing images, and just the voice you have is awesome.
thank you. I think I think what helped was that I didn't have an MFA. Like, I didn't go to school for this. I'm not very refined, so I wrote by ear. I wrote in the way we would talk, and I wrote, and I'd read it out to myself, and if it had the sing-songy quality, then it sounded true and right, and then I just kind of let myself make mistakes in that way. I let myself feel it out.
Do you have any lessons learned or anything that you would like to share? Because I know, like Diane and I, we started writing a book, and then we have multiple hats we wear, so we kind of tabled it, and we've been working with a woman to help us write this book, and she keeps reaching out to us.
It sounds like we should go to a cabin in the woods.
She's like, have you guys done anything? Where are you? And we're horrible, Diane, because we're just so busy. We need a cabin. But we probably kill each other if we're in a cabin together for a whole month. Just teasing.
Well,
but we love each other, I know.
All these years, talking to people and meeting a lot of really interesting characters, and seeing, like, actually what I've learned now that I know a lot of writers, and it's either published or aspiring, what's interesting about it is, like, it's very hard to predict who's going to get published and who doesn't, except because it's not about talent. It's not, I mean, you have to have a craft. You have to have a basis of craft, especially to write a novel. Slightly different for, like, prescriptive nonfiction. That's more of, like, having something to say, right? But the thing that makes somebody a published author versus an aspiring writer is learning how to finish. What happens most times with especially novices, right, is you write that first page and you're really excited about it. You got that opening paragraph and you're pumped. All the energy of this whole project is, like, in that. And then that you're exhausted. That day you're just like, okay, I did good work. So the next day you're waiting for that kind of excitement to happen for the second page, but while you're waiting for that to kick in, you go and you edit the first page, right? And you're kind of like, that doesn't sound right, or I don't know what I was thinking. Now it's awful. I'm just going to erase it. I'll rewrite it. And you can do that for years. And that's what people do. You get stuck editing, the
We
second
didn't even
chapter.
get to that part. So
Yeah, you know, and I think especially when you're doing it with a partner, you can talk the energy out of a project, you know, and
Right,
it can
right,
be
right, right,
very
right, right.
exciting. But if you talk about it so much, it almost kind of releases the pressure within you to have to write it down, you know. And so I think the biggest thing that I could suggest is finish the horrible shitty first, sorry, that first draft, you know. It's like
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
make it ugly, make it horrible. It's a lot easier to edit when you have and it's a lot easier to clean something up when it exists, but it has to
Uh-huh.
yes,
exist
Yeah.
but
first.
we're still in the outline, Jess.
Hey, you know, yeah. But
Yeah.
an outline, even an outline, because you can start overthinking that, and then stops feeling organic, and then you're like, why did we do this in the first place? Oh my god, you know. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is next
Yeah.
for you, Jasmine?
Yeah.
What's on your plate?
Yeah. What's coming down the
Well,
pike?
so while I was in that 10 years that I was trying to write that book, I was also writing a memoir. And
10
part
years.
of,
You
I
hear
think,
that, Beth? Did you hear the 10 years?
Right.
Go
Yeah.
on, Jess.
yeah, the instant 10-year overnight success. That's what people always talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, and I read Outliers, and so I kept kind of going. That was why he was like, what did Malcolm Gladwell, it was like 40,000 hours or something, right? And so I think that was what powered me through all those rejections. I just kept saying, oh well, I only fail if I give up. I only fail if like I stop trying, right? If I keep trying, then I'm just still racking up my 40,000 hours. Like I kept kind of saying that. And so while I was doing that, there were a lot of kind of, my life has been a series of chaos and tragedy and catastrophe. And so I started kind of on the side writing these scenes of things that I had a very hard time um rising from and healing, you know. And I spent a lot of my young adulthood kind of almost being the victim of my own, you know, journey, and you know, introducing myself to people, and kind of introducing myself as my pain, and here's what happened to me, and that's who I am. And so I was kind of, I never really set out to write a memoir, because with memoir you have a whole nother set of imposter syndrome things, you know, of like, who am I to, who cares about my story and all of these things. But I think once my stepfather died tragically when I was 12, and that was something that I could never kind of not tell everybody that I met, you know, because it defined so much of my life. And
Mhm.
what I found was when I started writing certain scenes that I remember of the days immediately before and after his death, somehow I could digest it. If I could put it into word, I could kind of process it in a way that I couldn't otherwise. And so I started kind of not really acknowledging that I was working on this project, but still doing it. So I have a memoir that now is more of like my own journey. It's kind of a companion piece to Hula, I think, my own journey and my kind of relationship with Hawaii, and the, you know, the politics of identity of my own self. But I've also been writing. So when I moved to Sacramento, I went to, my daughter was homeschooled, so we'd go on all these field trips and everything. I promise there's a point. I come back to it. We would go on all these field trips. And so one of the first field trips that we went to was at Sutter's Fort. And John Sutter kind of established Sacramento, right? When Northern California and you know, and the Central Valley was a very kind of inhospitable environment, right? And so he got this land grant because he was kind of one of the only people that could settle there and start a fort. But what I didn't know, and what I learned at the fort, was they have a bunch of his diary entries, you know, blown up and kind of painted onto walls at the fort as an exhibit. And multiple entries started with my Kanakas, which is a word for a Hawaiian. My Hawaiians, you know, did this, and I wouldn't be anywhere without my Hawaiians. And so I asked the guide, like, what's the story? And he's like, I give this tour every single day, they don't, and basically he's like, without those Hawaiians, there would be no Sutter's Fort. They were the one, like the first structure of Sutter's Fort was a Hawaiian style thatch roof hut. And,
Oh,
you
interesting.
know, and they were the ones that were like braiding nets to throw across the Sacramento and the American River to catch salmon and all of these things. And they were actually acted as like his emissaries when he initially came to Sacramento. The local, you know, indigenous peoples living throughout the Central Valley see these brown tattooed people and they're like, what's going on? And Hawaiians at that time were very civilized. You know, they were one of the most literate countries in the kingdoms in the world. And but they had a knack for language, and so they were able to communicate with locals and kind of vouch for Sutter, to say like, here's this guy, he's cool, like he won't, you know, kill you, he'll work with you, so like, don't, you know, like, let us be. And so I tried for years to find out more about these Hawaiians, because the guide was telling me, he's like, I don't even know their names. Like, that's it. That's all we know about them. Nobody wrote anything about them. So I started kind of over the years, just out of curiosity of like, what's the deal with this very important group of Hawaiians to California history? And now I have found enough that I realize I won't ever be able to like write a nonfiction portrayal of them and what they did to at least my satisfaction. But there's evidence to suggest that they were the ones who started the gold. They were the ones who first found gold. And so what I've been working on is using fiction to kind of connect those dots of history in a way that we can't with nonfiction, right? With, you know, very kind of discriminatory record keeping and everything. You know, there were very, you know, they got their claims stolen, and so there isn't a lot of archival footage and materials that is specific about this group. But I got enough that yes, so I'm doing kind of like a
Oh, that's
Tolentino
fabulous.
rewriting of California history from the Hawaiian perspective.
Maybe you'll get
Yeah.
Brad Pitt to
Really,
star in
really,
your movie.
no,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, then you'll have really life-changing money.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my kids would like that. Yeah.
so Jasmin Iolani Hakes,
Yes.
correct? Jasmin
Yes.
Right.
Iolani Hakes, thank you so much. And by the way, Iolani means heavenly hawk. So thank you for
Yes.
sharing that with us. So Jasmin, author of the book Hulu, we so enjoyed having you on the podcast today. Thank you to our listeners. Beth, do you want to thank our sponsors?
Sure. We want to thank our sponsors today, City National Bank, Manette Law Firm, Uncle Nearest, a Black female-owned spirits company, Interpublic Group, PR Company Advertisement Media, Amplified Professional Services, Executive Search, and IT Consulting. Thank you for listening. Hit your subscribe button.
And I didn't mention the book name, Beth. Let's repeat the book name. Jasmin is author of the book Hulu.
Hula. I know we automatically say Hulu, but even my partner says, yeah, he's like the subscription.
I said Hulu in my notes. So
okay.
Hula. Okay.
Hula. Yes.
So,
thank you so much.
So I'll take it, Beth. So I apologize for interrupting you. So thank you for listening. Hit the subscribe button, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you find your podcast. Leave us a review. Do follow us on social media. We're all over LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and we love hearing from you. Send us an email at csuiteexecs at Gmail. And the website is www. Thank you.
And thank you, Jasmin, for being part of our community.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.